Okay, so I put in the corner here on the screen the ECO, or the exam content outline, just to kind of keep that in front of you, that this particular area around scheduling and so forth falls under the ECO domain number 2 called process, and it's under task 6, plan and manage schedule. It just kind of gives you a visual of where you see the critical path, you know, where it falls in the ECO and the domains, right? Defining and sequencing activities, estimating their durations, and developing the schedule are all planning functions. And so throughout the project, you're going to be using the earned value management to control the schedule, and you're going to be managing changes to it. And of course, Chris is going to be talking to you about EVM here in just a little bit. In the Rita Mulcahy book, which I strongly encourage you to get, I know there's the Andy Crow book as well. Some folks have used that. You can get that as well. But I know in the Rita book, she has some PMI isms, statements that she notes there that are considered to be true for the exam, unless the details in the exam question tell you otherwise. And knowing some of these PM-isms can help you kind of pick the best answer from what seems like sometimes more than one correct answer. And so I encourage you to kind of review those if you get her book. I'm sure Andy Crow's probably got something similar, but I just wanted to repeat some of those in there just so you can kind of get a flavor for how this is going to be reflected on the exam. So some of the things you'll want to keep in mind, some of her PM-isms were planning is important and all projects must be planned. I mean, that seems, you know, rational, right? The project manager plans the project with input from the team and stakeholders, not on their own, so they don't do project planning of the project schedule in a vacuum. They rely on their team for input. Project cost and schedule cannot be finalized without completing risk management, because managing risk ends up saving time and money. And the project manager creates realistic estimates for the overall project schedule and its associated costs. The project management plan has to be realistic, and everyone has to believe that it can be achieved. I mean, for them, that's the general overtone you want to have as a project manager when you're working to build a schedule. And a realistic schedule is absolutely the project manager's key accountability. So there are all things to keep in mind as you address the studying for the exam, and particularly how it pertains to, planning schedule. Okay. So we're going to talk about critical path this evening. And again, y'all have already been through this in a prior class, but this hopefully will help to solidify some of the concepts for you. I do encourage you to work as many critical paths exercises as you possibly can come across, because it'll just make help you to become more and more confident as you do them. At first, it seemed very daunting to me, very intimidating in some regards. But again, with practice and going over the exercises, you'll just get really, really comfortable with it. But tonight, hopefully, we'll be able to solidify some of the concepts for you. Okay. So the critical path method, or we'll call it CPM, is one of many techniques that can be used to create a schedule model, and ultimately is going to help you to finalize the project schedule. CPM occurs after we've defined our activities and we've sequenced the activities. This technique is considered a precedence diagramming method. You may hear that word, or PDM, because the activities are represented by nodes and they're graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are going to be performed. CPM is used to estimate the minimum project duration and to determine the amount of schedule flexibility on the logical network paths within the schedule model. So this is what we're really trying to do, is determine where we might have some flexibility or even some constraints, right? This technique calculates the early start, the early finish, the late start, and the late finish dates for all activities without regard for any resource limitations by performing a forward and then the backward path analysis through the schedule network. Critical path is the sequencing of the activities, and it represents the longest path through the project, which determines the shortest possible project duration. So there's, again, a way for us to find out how long is it actually going to take us to get this project done. It's made up of activities that cannot be delayed without delaying the finish of the project. So these are main activities that we've got to get done. Critical path calculations can show where you've got schedule risks, and a critical path is normally characterized by zero total float. In other words, the path with no flexibility for delaying any activities. So CPM is used to calculate the amount of scheduling flexibility, or what we call float, on the logical network paths in the schedule model. And in addition to critical path, you should be also familiar with the concept of a near critical path. This path is closest in duration to the critical path. Something could happen that shortens the critical path or lengthens the near critical path to the point where the near critical path becomes critical. So knowing what your near critical paths are is also an important aspect of doing this exercise. The closer in length the near critical and critical paths are, the more risk the project has. So you'll need to focus time and effort monitoring and controlling in your monitoring and controlling activities on both the critical and near critical paths, because there can be more than one, so that you don't end up with any delay in your project completion. Okay. Any questions there? If you have any, do feel free to unmute. Okay, great. So let's continue on to determining the critical path. So the critical path, you really got a two-phase process, as y'all have seen already last week, and so we're going to go back through that. We're going to calculate the forward path. This is going to help us to determine the early start time and the early finish time for each of the project activities. And then we're going to calculate that backward path so that we can determine the latest start time and the latest finish time for each of the activities. And again, this is also going to help us to understand what our flexibility is, or our float is as well. Okay. So as I mentioned previously, CPM is a technique, and it's used in conjunction with the precedence diagramming method, or the PDM, where activities are represented by nodes, and they're graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are to be performed. So for each activity, we're going to place the activity name in a box or a grid like you see on the screen here, and then we're going to use the area around that box to capture the early start, duration, early finish, late start, total, and then our total float and flexibility, and the late finish for the activity. This method, again, is described as an activity on node, or AON. Another method you might hear about is the arrow on arrow, or AOA, where the activity is diagrammed on the arrow. AOA, we're not going to cover AOA today because it's not a commonly used diagramming method, and you will likely not see it on the exam, but you should be familiar with the term, okay? Sometimes it can show up as a multiple choice answer, and most of the time, like I said, you're not going to see it reflected on the exam, okay? All right, so let's move forward now that you see what the—
Can you repeat what is ALA stand for?
Arrow on arrow, or I think that's what no, activity on arrow. I'm sorry, activity on arrow. Okay. All right, so determining the critical path. Use activity on the most logical finish start. Okay, so bear with me for just a quick second. Okay, I'm back. So we're going to get started using the AON for the finish to start sequence. I know you all remember that term from last week as well. Finish to start is the most used relationship between activities. So finish to start is defined as an activity that must finish first before the next activity or successor activity can start. For example, you've got to finish digging a hole before you can start the next activity of planting a tree. On the exam, you'll likely be given a table. I think that's part of my problem here is I don't have a table here. Bear with me for a minute. There it is. Okay. On the exam, you'll likely be given a table like the one you see here, but you should be prepared to convert it to a set of tasks written down into a table like this. The first step will be to draw the diagram that represents the activities in a sequence that will reflect the dependencies and the duration moving from left to right, and each activity node will have the format as noted in the task box.
Hey, Cindy, it's Chris. Just a quick note. Yeah, you realize the way these slides are built, they're one at a time. If you want to avoid that, you could just step off and not show it in presentation mode, but I don't know if that, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, I might move to that in just a moment. Thanks. I appreciate that. I forgot it ends up building. Okay. So again, yes. So as you can see here, each one of the task boxes that's going to represent task A, B, C, and D. We're going to put A where it says activity name, and then we're going to be building the rest of the details around that activity name as we go forward. Okay. Let's go ahead and build it. All right, so our diagram is going to end up, after we go through this effort, our diagram will end up looking like this, and we're going to end up with each task in a box and the duration of the task noted above the task name. So as we looked at the box, we could see here that task A has a duration of 14. We can see that task B has a duration of 3 days, and it has the predecessor of A, right? So we draw our arrow from A to B. Task C has a duration of 5. We put our 5 right above. And then it too comes after task A, right? And then box D, or activity D, has a duration of 7 days, and its predecessors are B and C, and then we have the finish. So this is going to be our first step in building our forward path. Okay. All right. So determining the critical path, there are a number of steps, and we've already done a few of those already, right? We've gotten our diagram organized them in a flow going from left to right, and we've identified all the activities that can begin immediately. We've identified the next dependent activity, and we continued in the logical relationship in that network path, and then we completed that process until all the successors were identified. And now we can move on to where we start beginning the build. Okay. So calculating the forward path is really pretty simple. You're just going to take the duration, and you're going to carry it forward. Okay. We start with the zero. The initial task starts at day 0. We have a duration of 14. So our early finish for task A is going to be 14. And then let me know if this doesn't build. I know we've had some trouble with the building on it, right? And then because the early finish is 14, that carries forward into the early start for B and C. Okay, so we're going to see that build to 14. Okay, and then we're going to add for task B, we're going to get the early finish by adding 14, the early start, to the 3 of duration, to get 17, and the same for C, 14 plus 5 to be 19. So now we have our 2 early finishes for these tasks that have come after task A. Now we need to carry forward the highest early finish date, early finish duration into task D, okay? And we're going to bring that to task D, okay? And then we're going to add our duration of 7 for task D, and we end up at 26. So that is how we will do our forward path. So we see here the longest path is, or the total path, or the longest path is 26 days to complete this path through this set of tasks. Okay. Any questions? Okay, great. Okay, now our next task is to do the backward pass, right? And so we're going to identify the next dependent activities. We're going to complete that process until all the predecessors have been identified. Of course, we've already done this. And now we're going to calculate that backward pass, okay? And on the backward pass, we want to note that when you have more than one preceding activity connected to multiple succeeding activities, the smallest late start becomes the late finish of the connected preceding activities. We'll see this as we go through this. So we're going to go ahead and start there with step 5. So let's get our path back in here, okay? So here we are now. We've completed that forward pass. We're going to bring our early finish down to be the late finish for task D, right? And then we're going to subtract the duration, 26 minus 7, to get our late start, okay? And since we only have this last activity here as a single activity, we're going to bring that late start back to B and C as 19, and that's going to be their late finish, right? Then we're going to do the same thing of subtracting the duration out, 19 minus 3 and 19 minus 5, and those are going to give us the late start for B and C, okay? And now we see that we have a late start here of 16 for B and a late start for 14. And when we're going backwards, we take the lower number and bring it forward, bring it back to task A. So now we bring that back to task A, and that becomes the late finish for task A of 14 days. We subtract out the 14 and we get 0. Okay, so now we've done our forward pass and our forward pass and our backward pass, and now we can determine what the float is for each of these as well. Okay, and our float becomes the difference between our early finish and our late finish, right? So 26 minus 26 is 0, 19 minus 19 is 0 for task C. Okay, 19 minus 17 gets our float of 2 for task B, and then 14 minus 14 is 0 for A. Okay. So activities on the critical path have a 0 total float. Critical path activities that are delayed or have an imposed completion date can result in negative float. Negative float has to be addressed before the project begins. As you recall, the project manager is responsible for ensuring that the project schedule is realistic and achievable. Negative float analysis can, of course, result in options to bring the schedule back within the baseline, and y'all learned about some of those techniques last week. Float is an asset on a project as it provides for flexibility. So that's really kind of a key thing to keep in mind. Float is just the equivalent of how much flexibility is in the schedule. If you know where you have float, you can use it to help organize and manage a project. For example, if you have a resource who's not very experienced, but whom you must use for the project, you can assign them, assuming they have the skill set, to work on the activity with the most float. This will give you some level of security. Even if the activity takes a little bit longer, the project is less likely to be delayed. Okay. All right. So in summary, we're going to use that critical path method to create our theoretical early start, early finish, late start, and late finish while ignoring any resource limitations, okay? Our longest path through the network defines the critical path, and you can have multiple critical paths, and as I stated earlier, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those near critical paths as well, because they can become your critical path. Your late finish minus your early finish is going to give you, the amount of float or flexibility you have in being able to delay that task. And your free float is going to tell you how long you can actually delay the next activity. Okay. Any questions or comments? Matt, anything you would like to clarify or relay that maybe I didn't?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah.
Cool.
So total float is for each activity, where free float is for the entire path or a project? Is that another way to think about it?
Sort of. Total float is when you're going to change the end date. But it's going to be within any particular item that's on the critical path. If you have 10 things to do that are part of your critical path, if you lengthen any of those by a day, you change the end. So it does affect, I don't want to say it affects the whole thing, but it affects your overall. The free float is going to not change the end date of the of the project, but what it will do is delay an early start. So you have a project, you have an activity A that's done. You could normally start activity B right away, but you can't hit that early start because another activity is delaying it. So you still get in within your late start, but you can't hit your early start date.
Okay. All right, that makes more sense. Thanks.
So, for
Wait,
example, in this.
Hello. Hi, I'm sorry. I have a question. This is David Bannon. For the life of me, I'm trying to wrap my head around that we can have more than one critical path. And maybe it's just late in the day and I'm just not picking it up. But how can that be?
If you have, right now we have A, B, C, and D. If B and C are the same length, you have two critical paths. You have A, B, and D are the same length, and A, C, and D are the same length. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does mathematically. It just, yeah, it just maybe it's just late in the day and I'm just kind of wiped. But let me think on that more then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you have two critical paths that are the same length, they're both critical path. And then if you had, so if C has a duration of 7 in this example, then you have B and C are both 7, and if B, they would both have no float then, right? Because they're both on the critical path. Because A and D are the same, no matter what. If one of those is delayed, you're going to delay the project. So they're both on the critical path, and I mean, and I'm not sure if that's. I tried to point that out last week. When we talk critical path, a lot of people mistake critical path for criticality. So you could have a item that is very, very long, but it's not super important, and maybe it's on your critical path, but it's not as critical as something else that may not take as much time, but that you also have some float around that item. So I'm not sure if that's what's causing the problem here. Remember that criticality has nothing to do with critical path. It's how critical this particular one item is. I mean, technically speaking, they all are. You have to have them all done to finish the project, but some things are, they do the bigger, more important function, and so they need to be done. But they're not necessarily critical path. So you just got to remember that it has nothing to do with how important the item is. It has to do with how much time you have to do it.
Gotcha. I appreciate the context. That helped. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I think we have another activity we can go through. I think we want to walk on through this one just to see it happen again. Is that correct? And because this one has a little bit more complexity in it.
Yeah, this one will show it'll demonstrate that the free float a little better too. You'll see some free float, I think, between B and F. So. Okay,
cool. All right. So as we noted before, you'll get your activity and your chart pretty well set up. Again, do expect that you might be given a chart like this, but at the same time, it may be written out in words, and you'll have to put it into the chart. So one of the things I always did was just practice making that chart. Looking at a lot of different problems, ones that were written like that, and then again some that weren't. So it's just a good idea to know how to make this chart, be very familiar with how it's laid out, so that you can quickly get it down when you get into the exam. Okay. So we've already got all of our activities defined. We have our predecessors defined, and we have the duration. And again, we're keeping in mind we're putting our box around each activity, and we know which values need to be in each box as we go forward. Okay. So we're going to put our first durations into the box where we've drawn out our diagram first, and then we're putting in the durations that go into the box, right? And then we're going to do our forward pass through, okay? And again, that's simply starting with the 0 in the first task and then adding the durations through, okay? So 0 plus 7 gives us the 7 right here. We're going to bring 7 forward for both task C and D. Then we're going to add the durations in.
Yeah, Cindy, this is where this
it
started
got
to
a
get complicated.
Yeah.
When we do
so
when it builds the slide that repeats itself.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes here. So we see we got the 7, 7. We did 7 plus 2 is 9. And because B and H are successors, we're going to bring the 9 forward for their early start, right? 7 plus 8 is going to be 15. Hopefully that'll calculate. It sure did. And from 15 to 15 here, we brought it forward into its successor E, okay? Now we're going to be adding up our duration, our early start to our duration to get the early finish for E, B, and H. So we'll go down that path up. So building right back through it. We've put 9 plus 3 is 12 here. Okay. 15 plus 5 is 20. We brought it on forward for G because we have one successor for G. Okay. We still need to find out what H is to bring forward, determine what we're bringing forward. 9 plus 5 is 14, so we bring the greater number forward for the early start for F. And then we go back through our build here. 20 plus 1 is 21 for G. 14 plus 6 is 20 for F. Our higher number, 21, will go into I as an early start. 21 plus 9 is going to give us 30 for our early finish, and we will have finished our forward path. Okay. Now on our backward pass, we're going to bring our early finish down into the late finish. Okay. And then we subtract the duration to get our late start of 21. Our 21 is going to be able to be pulled back into G and F, right? Okay. Then we're going to do our subtraction to do the floats for each as we go back. So 21 minus, well, no, not yet. I don't know why that did that. That's odd. Because we didn't finish getting the paths back. Oh, that's, it didn't work exactly right. Yep. So let me pull this back. Sorry about that. Okay, here we are. So 21 to 21, right? And then we do our subtraction off of the durations to get the late start of 20 and 15. The 20, of course, is going to go straight back to E here as the late finish. For F, the late start was 15, and since it's the only number here, we're going to bring it back for B and H, 15 and 15. Okay, and let's continue forward. We see that 15 minus 3 is 12 here. 15 minus 5 is 10 for H. We're going to bring the lower number back as the late finish for task D. We brought back 15 for task E to C. Okay. Right. We finish out the calculation. We see 10 minus 2 is 8, and 15 minus 8 is 7. Again, bringing the lower number back to 7. 7 minus 7 is 0. Now we have our floats of 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. We can see here our critical path is A, C, E, G, and I. Okay. So how long is the critical path? Would anybody like to see what that critical path is?
30 days.
30. Yeah, 30 days, exactly, right? It's going to be that last number right there. Shouldn't have moved it. Okay, 30, right? How long is the critical path? I'm sorry, we did say how long is 30 days. What's the total float on activity D? Right, 1.
On D, 1.
Exactly. And what's the free float on activity B?
2.
Oh,
And are you guys getting that from calculating that? Or are you looking at the number up there on the answers? For
where-
the free float, it's going to be that 14 minus 12 is your free float. You can delay B by 2 days and still start F on the 14th. It's early start date. But you could, if you were a day later than that, if you were on, you finished, say you started B on day 10 and you finished on day 13, you still won't delay the project, right? Because you're still coming in before the 14th.
wait, yeah. Can I ask you a quick question? Did you subtracted? Did you say you subtracted 12 and 14, or did you subtract? Okay, okay.
12 and 14. You can make your early start date and still you're still fine making your early start date on that one. So, but if you come in on day 15, you make your late start date still on F, but you still end on time, right? Because you had a day of float there. So that the early start date is what you're looking at for free float. So it's that between B and C, it's that 14 and the 12. So you can be 2 days late and still start on the 14th. If you're one more day late, you'll start on the day 15, and that will cause you to miss the early start date on F. But if you start on the 15th and it takes 6 days, you're still done by the 21st day, and you still finish on time, right? That's where the free float comes in. It has to do with the predecessor delaying your early start. It doesn't mean that you'll be delaying the project. Total float, like if you add 4 days to B, you'll blow it out of the water. That total float number, if you have 4 days to B, you'll end up being 31 days instead of 30 days at the end of the project. So it's that 14 and 12 is the free float number. And then, and B, within B or any of them, it'd be that 15 minus 12 is 3, that's your total float, or 15 minus 14 for H, it's 1, or 21 minus 20 on F is 1, or 21 minus 21 in G is 0.
So, so the free float is as long as there's a connector. So, like, is there free float between E and B, or the free float's just
E is not even on the same path. You won't have E won't delay F at all.
Right. So what I'm saying is, okay, so on the same path, as long as it's linked. So is there a free float between D and H?
I'm sorry, a free float between what?
D as in David and H as in Hilo.
Well, that's only the successor and predecessor, the two that are next to each other. Yeah.
Okay, so as long as they're connected, like B and H are. Okay, that's
right. And there can be free float all over the place. It just, you don't even think about it. The free float between D and B, you have the 9 minus 9 is 0, so you have 0 free float. You have, but it exists. It's just a 0. It's going to be when you have these multiple paths that you're going to end up. I mean, beyond 2 paths, you're going to end up with possibility of free float being different than your regular float.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. All right. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I got a little lost when you're working backwards on how to get the late start. Like in F, had you get 15? In H, how'd you get 10?
So I got 15 and then the 10 here.
Okay. No. For late start in box F, how'd you get 15?
21 minus 6.
21 6.
21. Okay, got it. Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, you're going backwards and subtracting out the duration.
At the duration. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right. Any other questions?
So, I'm sorry, I got a question. on B, the total float is 3, but the free float is 2. What does it mean?
Okay, so 2, the free float, means that I can delay B by 2 days or 2 units if this was days, and I could still make my day, I could still start F on day 14. If I delay B by 3 days, now that's, I exceed my free float. I cannot start F on day 14 because B takes more than 3 days to, it took more than 3 days. I used up all of my float. But I can still make my late start date on F. So I'm essentially using my total float on from B or on F to finish the project on time. So when you're looking at B, you're starting late, but not late enough that F can't absorb it so that you end on time. So total float, if you had 4 days in B, and if you took 4 days, delayed B by 4 days, F would not even start on time. It would start on day 16, and so you would end up being on day 22. And so I would not start until day 22, so it would end until day 31. So you would actually end late if you exceed the total float. But if you only exceed the free float without exceeding the total float, all you're doing is delaying F, which is not a big deal because you have float there as well. Does that make sense?
I follow you now. Thank you.
Great questions.
And that is the difference between total float and free float. Which float, by the way, is slack. I think I talked about that the other day. But yeah, remember that. I don't know that they'll use it in the test. They didn't on mine, but they kept warning us that they might. So they described it in the handbook. So it's still on the table, I think. Just
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah. Okay. And just kind of keeping in mind, I mean, it means flexibility. What level of flexibility we got in the schedule, right? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think we're good for right now. If you think of anything between now and the time we finish, we can certainly wrap back around if we need to. Okay.
Sorry, real quick, do you any recommendations on like online exercises that we can practice this?
Yeah. In fact, let me see. I think I've got my book. I have.
You guys can make your own too, by the way.
Yep.
Make your own item, and if you have Microsoft Project, I don't know if you do or not. If you have Microsoft Project, you can put your activities out there. I mean, do it by hand and calculate everything out, and then if you can actually look at your critical path in Microsoft Project, it will calculate it correctly for you. So you could practice, you can make up your own things and then put it in, plug it in the Microsoft Project and see if it works out that way. The other thing I did, and I don't know if I still have it, if I still have it, I can send it out to you guys. I made a little randomizer that kind of generated random durations, and then I had a couple different predecessor maps, the mapping before we put all the stuff in. It randomized some durations, and then you have to fill in blanks, kind of. So if I still have it, you can do that, and that's almost an infinite number of probabilities here of stuff to happen. So, but in the meantime, just make your own and test it. That's all I can tell you. You can test it with Microsoft Project, or if there's another tool out there. Chartist is one. I don't know what other ones that might be out there, but.
And I got a book by or workbook by Eileen Ellis. Her name is spelled Aileen. Last name is Ellis. And this workbook is titled "How to Get Every Network Diagram Question Right on the PMP Exam," and that's the book I used, as having some extra problems to work. So I highly recommend it. I didn't have any trouble at all. I don't think with any of the questions on the exam after working through this workbook.
Can you say the name of that workbook again, please?
How to Get Every Network Diagram Question bright on the PMP exam. Eileen Ellis, Aileen. And she has some other books too on earned value management and on contract calculations as well. So my partner, my study partner, and I, we worked through both of those books. We also, of course, worked through the Mulcahy book as well. She had a lot of great problems in there as well. We felt very confident, and I felt like I did well on the exam by using those books.
Hey, and Cindy, it's Chris. I will add for everybody, one of the tools I use for kind of solidified training and reinforcing it was YouTube. There's tons of videos out on YouTube, and sometimes if you're like me, if you're a visual learner, you see it from a different perspective and it clicks. So search YouTube and you'll be surprised.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, then, I think that takes us to EVM. So I can turn it back over to you.
We're probably at a good point. We can take a break. It'll be a nice clean separation between the two. We come back and just get some water, whatever you need to do. So Matt, have you all been doing 10-minute breaks up until this point? Is that still standard? I'll assume yes. So guys, let's do this. Let's break until the top of the hour. I got 6:50 East Coast time. Okay, thanks. And so we'll come right back at 7 o'clock Eastern, or just 10 minutes from now, and we'll get kicked off on EVM. It's going to be fun.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
All right, guys, I got 7 o'clock my time, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And if anybody, I'm sure everybody's just still out there, they'll come back in the next minute if they haven't come back yet. All right, so we are going to talk about earned value management, EVM for short. And as I mentioned up at the front of the call, you haven't seen this yet in the normal class info, right? In any of the normal classes. This has not been introduced to you yet. You're going to see this in a couple weeks. Actually, when Cindy and I are going to come back and we're going to teach a couple classes together, and this is going to be part of the classes that we class that we teach. So you're actually getting a review before you see it for the first time, but that's fine because it kind of flows and makes sense based off of what we just reviewed. We just reviewed scheduling, reviewed critical path, and doing all that, and this is closely aligned with it. This is actually a methodology. As you'll see up here on the screen, I'll go ahead and jump into it. It's a methodology that combines scope, schedule, and resource measurements. And with it, you can assess your project performance and your progress throughout your project execution. So as you move through a project, you can use these formulas and these methodologies that we're going to be talking about to calculate, like I said, your project performance and your project progress. So if somebody says, is everything on schedule? How's it going? You can give them specifics. And this is going to show you how you can give those kind of specifics back. So what we can do is we can measure this progress by we can compare the actual schedule and the cost performance against what we planned for our performance. And you can find our planned performance in the beginning when you're doing the schedule baselines and the cost baselines. We've laid out what we want to achieve and when we want to achieve it and how we want to go about doing it. And then we take our actual progress that we make as we go through the project, and we can measure these things to see how we're doing overall. Okay. So first thing, if we want to assess the value of the work, it requires that we determine what work has actually been performed at any point in time, and then therefore what value has it contributed to the project. The amount of work and the value of the work kind of go hand in hand, and we'll talk about that as well. And when we're doing these kind of performance reviews that I mentioned, when we have project status review meetings with either customers or sponsors, internal, external, we have the chance to talk about this, and we can have a consistent measure of how we're progressing through the project. So this is the kind of tools that we can use to do that. So when you're back at the beginning and you're planning out the project as a whole, you're breaking down the work, the project work, into work packages and activities. And each one of these packages has an assigned budget, cost, and a schedule time. And because each of these activities have, that we're going to be able to determine schedule variances when they occur, and we can take action on it when we see it. All right, so let's talk cost and schedule performance. So we mentioned cost and schedule are the two things, time and money, that we're going to use to throw into here. So this whole EVM approach to monitoring cost and our schedule performance, it provides us metrics that show the variances from the baselines. We talked about that. And when you have this information, you can identify corrective actions if and when you need to take those and determine how you want to approach those. So what you see on the screen here, 3 independent variables that are involved in determining EVM. And we're going to use these to assess and monitor the project costs and the schedule as we progress through the project. And these 3 variables are used to provide measures as to whether or not the work that is being accomplished as planned, and to forecast our project cost at completion. And we'll talk about that as well. At any point in time in a project, you could say, I know what I've done, what's left in front of me, you can use to determine how much cost is left. And the variables that we're going to use for this are going to be planned value. You'll see this as PV. And like it says, how much we plan for something to cost. Planned value, another way to say it, it's an authorized budget that's assigned to scheduled work. So we planned out that work, we've scheduled out that work, and we have an authorized budget to go along with it. That is planned value. In simpler terms, you could also say that plan value indicates the value of the work scheduled to be done during a particular time period. Again, it's all about value of work is what we're going to be discussing here. Okay, the next one you'll see is earned value, EV. And as it says, how much of the planned costs have we delivered? This is the measure of work performed expressed in the terms of budget authorized for that work. EV itself is a composite measurement for both cost and time performance in relation to scheduled or planned cost and time performance. It's calculated, and we'll show formulas as we go through this, but it's calculated by you multiply the percentage of the work that you've completed by the budgeted cost for the activity that you laid out in your cost baseline. And that's how you get to EV. And again, we're going to walk through a sample that will make this straightforward and simple, as well as we're going to share all of the formulas. All right, and then the third one is actual cost, how much it actually costs. Pretty straightforward. It's the realized cost incurred for the work performed on an activity during a specific time period. And it's the actual cost is actually calculated and documented once you complete the work. You don't predict it. It's a look back in time. How much did you actually spend? Okay. And then you'll see spread. Like it says, how you plan to spread the work out. Our example that we're going to walk through tonight is linear, and it follows a straight path, straight line. And like it says, most aren't. And the PMBOK guide discusses the S-curve. You'll see that, where the cost will change throughout the life cycle of the project. It will start low, ramp up, taper off. It's one example. It doesn't have to follow that. It could have more curves in it. But just as an example, it doesn't have to follow a straight line. But tonight, our example is going to have a straight line. Okay. All right, so let's jump into this. So we have earned value management, and this is going to kick off our sample project that we're going to walk through. So first up, we have the project is to deliver 100 feet of 4-foot wide sidewalk. So let's say we're going to pour concrete and we're going to deliver or create or build a 100-foot sidewalk in somebody's neighborhood, right? The plan value, estimated that we can deliver 10 feet of sidewalk at $20 per linear foot, and it's a parametric estimate. And we talked about parametric estimates, I think, last week. It's basically if you've done something, if you've done this project over and over and over again, where you know you can boil it down and to say, look, it's going to cost me $20 per linear foot. I know this already. That's a parametric estimate, is that you can kind of boil it down to that kind of cost structure because you've done it so many times. Now we're going to include equipment, which is backhoe and a grader, the labor, and the materials, the concrete, the gravel, the forms, those wooden squares. So we have nice squares when we pour our concrete. Estimated we can deliver 20 feet of sidewalk a week. Again, that is a parametric estimate as well. We know that from past experience. Total estimated time to deliver, 100 feet at 20 feet per week. So you divide, obviously, 100 divided by 20, that gives you 5 weeks. So it's going to take us 5 weeks to do this project from beginning to end. Total estimated cost to deliver, 100 feet at $200 for every 10 feet. So up, we said $20 per linear foot. So for 10 feet, 20 times 10 is 200, right? So you just follow the math. It's pretty straightforward on here. 100 feet at $200 for every 10 feet. That's $2,000 will be the total cost that we're expected to spend on this project. Now, we said we're going to do it in 5 weeks. So you take $2,000 divided by 5, and we expect that we're going to complete 20 feet per week and spend $400 per week, right? So that's our plan. This is the linear. The linear is where we start. Okay, so let's jump into some of these formulas and work out through some of the math. We have estimated delivered walk, 100 feet, 5 weeks, 20 feet of walk per week is what we're talking about. Planned value is 20 feet times 200 at $10 a foot, or 10 feet, I'm sorry, or $20 per foot is $400. So our planned value is $400 per week times 5. Budget at completion. So how much BAC is budgeted completion? How much do we plan to spend throughout the life of this project? How much are we budgeted that we will spend at the end when we're done? That's $2,000. All right, so week 1, again, linear. Planned value is 400. Plan to spend $400 and complete 20 feet of walk. Week 2, our new total is $800, and we're going to have 40 feet total of walk. Week 3, planned value is $1,200, 60 feet of walk. So you see the math here. It's just adding up very systematically. Week 4, $1,600 and 80 feet of walk. Week 5, $2,000 and 100 feet of walk. And we're done. That's the plan. That's our planned value, and we're breaking it out. All right, so now let's jump into it. So this is the actual role play, if you will. We're going to, well, not role play, but we're going to walk through each week, and we're going to see how we're doing. We're going to play it out into a scenario. So week 1, planned value, $400. We already knew that. Planned value is 20 foot of sidewalk, $20 a linear foot. Our planned value is $400. Earned value. So this is, what did we actually do? So the week is over. How do we do? We delivered 20 feet of sidewalk as per plan. Good job. We delivered 20% of the total sidewalk at $2,000. So our earned value is the percentage of what we delivered. So times the BAC, budgeted completion, $2,000. So earned value is $400. Actual cost, how much did we actually spend? How much money did we spend? We spent $400 as planned. So we're right on target between planned value, earned value, and actual cost. All right, so again, planned value 400, earned value 400, actual cost 400. This is still week 1, so hang with me. Schedule variance, this is a new one, SV. And how do you get to it? You take the earned value minus the planned value. So 400 minus 400 is 0. If we get a 0, like it says, it shows we delivered what we planned to deliver. We're right on track. Here's another one, Schedule Performance Index, SPI. Schedule Performance Index. Anytime you see the word index, you know you're going to be, there's division involved, right? Just know that. And it's very similar to when you look at schedule variance, it's EV minus PV. SPI is EV divided by PV. And that gives us 400 over 400 equals 1. This shows that we delivered 1 unit of work for every planned unit of work. We did exactly, from a schedule, what we were planning to do. And now we have 2 cost calculations. Cost variance is EV minus AC. So there's a cost component in there. And that's earned value minus actual cost. And that's 400 minus 400 equals 0. It shows what we spent, that we spent what we planned to spend. Again, right on track. And then here we have another index, a CPI, Cost Performance Index. And that's EV divided by AC. So again, the same components as cost variance, but it's divided. So 400 divided by 400 is 1. This shows we spent $1 for every dollar of work completed. So our cost and the work, the value, the earned value, we're right on track with 1. Okay, so we're going to see these again. So we're going to keep plugging through this. We're now on the week 2. So we know that our planned value, we put it out there that we want to have $800 in planned value. We want to have 40 feet of sidewalk completed at the end of week 2. And our PV, $800. How do we do? Earned value. At the end of the week 2, we had $700 in earned value. And you're like, uh-oh, we missed it. What happened? We only delivered 35 feet of sidewalk, and that's 5 foot less than we planned. It could be for various reasons, right? Maybe somebody got sick, maybe rain. It threw us off, but we only came back and delivered 35 feet versus our planned 40. So we delivered 35%, and this works out because we have 100 foot of sidewalk that we're trying to deliver. So 35 feet of 100, 35%. It's a nice math, but it's not always that case. But we delivered 35% of the total sidewalk times our BAC, our budgeted completion of $2,000. So we are earned value is $700. That's how we got to that number. So planned value 800, earned value came in short at 700. What do we actually spend? We spend $800, right? So our AC, our actual cost, is $800. So the only thing that's out of whack on here is earned value. What we delivered, we came up short, but we still had to pay everybody to be there. For whatever reason, we just weren't as efficient. We came short. All right, let's take another look at this. Still week 2. So we know our earned value is only 700. We know our actual cost is 800. So let's look at schedule variance. EV, earned value, minus planned value. 700 minus 800, that's a negative 100. Like it says, negative variance is bad. This shows we delivered $100 less than we planned in earned value. Schedule Performance Index, SPI, EV divided by PV. 700 divided by 800, 0.875. Anything below 1 is bad. So this shows we delivered 0.875 units of work for every planned unit of work. So again, if it's below 1, it's bad. Above 1, good. Cost variance. So look at the cost. EV minus AC, 700 minus 800, negative 100. This shows we spent what we planned to spend, because our plan was $800. Cost Performance Index, CPI, EV divided by AC, came in at 0.875. Again, below 1 is bad. This shows we spent $1 for every 87.5 cents worth of work completed. So again, the commonality across schedule variance and SPI and cost variance and CPI, EV, earned value is plugged into all of those. Okay, here's some more ways to look at this. We have budgeted completion. We already talked about this, $2,000, right? Budgeted completion is your budget for the project. Budget is subject to change through change request process. So if we're halfway through a project and we spent too much money, but we still need that money that we had budgeted for the second half to deliver, we may have to adjust our budgeted completion. And how do you do that? You go through a change request process, right? A formal approach to change part of the scope or some part of the project that you have laid out in the baselines or the project plans. Okay, so that's BAC. We have estimate at completion, and then we're going to talk about estimate to completion. So estimate at completion is your estimated cost to complete the project, right? So you know where you're at and how much more money do we need? What's our estimated cost to complete the project? So EAC, estimate at completion. Let me back up. Let me say, because estimate to completion is going to give us how much money we need to complete from here. Estimate at completion is how much money are we going to, what's our BAC going to look like? We blew it up a little bit. How much money do we need as a budget, a BAC, a budget at completion? So that's what estimate at completion is. All right, so how do you measure that? EAC, estimate at completion, is BAC, budgeted completion, divided by CPI, cost performance index, equals EAC is 2,000 over 0.875 equals 2285. So this is one way to do it, and we'll show you another way. $2,285. So what are we saying? We originally started with a BAC of $2,000. Now we're saying our estimate at completion, we got to revise it. We need more money. We need $285 more money, because that's how much we're going to spend at the total of this. Now, this formula is used right below. You'll see it says this represents a pervasive issue. It's an ongoing, repeated, reoccurring issue that we expect is going to happen from now to the end of the project. Like it says, with many anticipated rain delays or new labor contract at a higher rate, whatever's cost us to slip is going to keep happening until the end of the project. Now let's say that we knew it was just a one-time thing. It was a rain delay. And for whatever reason, we have the ability to look at the forecast and we know that it's not going to rain again over the next 5 weeks. Then you use the second one, EAC equals AC, actual cost, plus BAC minus EV. If you do the math, it gives us $2,100. Think of it, makes sense. This is a one-time thing happened. It threw us off, but we're going to get back on track, or we're just going to get back to our normal pace. So it's not going to cost us much money at the end. It's only $2,100. So just when you're going through this, I will stop right now and tell you all these formulas. You're going to have to memorize these formulas. There's no way around it. And this is one of the tough parts of the exam, is getting these in your head, getting them out onto a piece of paper before you start your exam. But you will want to memorize these. And if you can figure out why they are what they are mathematically and when to use them, it'll make your life a lot easier. And this example is going to walk you through this is a very simplified approach, but it gives you a good understanding of what these are used for. Okay. So at the bottom it says, at this point, the BAC, the budget, can be amended by change request. And if we look at the top one, if it's a pervasive issue, we can go and say we need $285. We got to add it to our budget. Sorry, we screwed up, whatever. But that's how much money we need if we want to deliver. Then the last one you'll see is estimate to completion. Again, Mentor, I was telling you that at this point, we're halfway through. How much more money are we going to have to spend to get this thing done? We already know that we have money spent behind us. What do we need going forward? And that's what this is to use to calculate. So estimate at completion is a revised budget at completion. Estimate to completion is from this point to the end of the project, how much more money we need. And that's EAC, which is the estimate at completion minus AC. So if you think about it, it makes it straightforward, right? Our revised budget minus how much money we've already spent in the past. The difference gives you what you need from here to the end, which is $1,485. Okay. All right. There is one more. You see on the right, EAC equals AC plus that combination. Like it says, this formula is included in the PMBOK, but did not show up on old exam. It is primarily used for ETC calculations. Matt, I can't remember what ETC stands for. Can you chime in really quick?
It's estimate to completion. It's right there, the bottom one. But just an FYI on that, I was going to say the first estimate at completion calculation is in the new material, but the second one for the one-time anomaly is not in the new material, so I don't know if it'll be there. The last one it's in the PMBOK, but it wasn't even and I'd never talked to anybody who had that on their exam. So probably you don't need that very last one. It is in the PMBOK, and if you got the time to memorize it, please do that. I would still remember the one-time anomaly thing. I don't, again, it wasn't in the new material, but it's quite possible that it'll still be there. So just something to keep in mind. But we use that last one. It's primarily for when you're using hypotheticals. Hey, you know what? We have to get done on budget, so budget is more important than the time. Or we have to get done on time, so hey, we can spend more money. So maybe our CPI is going to be higher to complete this thing because we want to come in on a schedule. So that's why they use that last one, and it did not show up on the exam before. I don't think it'll show up now, but I put it out there just in case.
And Matt, by that last one, when you say by that last one, you're talking about the formula that's off to the right-hand side.
The one that's where the BAC minus earned value is divided by CPI times SPI.
Okay.
Yeah, the right side. You're right.
I wouldn't sweat that one too much. If you're having trouble memorizing these things, that's probably good. And if there'll be a question on there, it'll be one question. So probably won't break you if you don't have that one. Just an FYI, strategy-wise. If you can learn it, that's great. But I doubt you'll see it.
All right. Thank you, Matt. All right. So let's keep going. Here's a couple more. It ends soon. Trust me. There's not that many. That's not ongoing. To complete performance index, TCPI. So everything has an index, right? This shows how efficient you must work to complete on budget. These formulas are also not in the new material, but are in the PMBOK. So it applies. We're not seeing this in there, but it's probably good to know. So to complete performance index, you have BAC minus EV, and you'll see that all divided by BAC divided by AC, and that gives you 1.08 in our example here. This formula is based on your budget at completion. Like it says, we need 1.08 cost performance index, CPI, to complete this project on budget. So we got to step it up, because if you remember, our CPI was below 1. We need it now to go above 1 if we want to meet it. Okay, so then we have TCPI another way, which is based off of EAC, estimate at completion, which is our revised, right, budget. And you'll see the way that divides out is 0.875. Since we've adjusted our budget that we need at the end, we don't have to overproduce in order to deliver at the end, if that makes sense, because we've adjusted our dollars. But it says we need 0.875 CPI to complete this project on budget, so we don't have to kill ourselves. So BAC is the original budget at completion, which was 2,000. EAC, estimate at completion, we revised to $2,285. And you'll see that in this formula right here, right? EAC minus AC. Okay, hopefully everybody's staying with me. All right, so let's move on. That was week 2. That was all, again, we just gave a performance update on how we're progressing on our project on a status call, and somebody says, how's it going? And I say, well, let me tell you how it's going. These are all the things that have happened, and this is where we slipped, this is where we made it, this is what we needed to pick it back up, and oh yeah, we need more money. All these formulas will help you determine that and speak to that. All right, so week 3. So planned value is $400 a week. We're in week 3. We want to finish $1,200 planned value, right? 60 feet of sidewalk, $1,200. How do we do? Earned value. Boom. $1,200. We delivered $1,200 in earned value. So we delivered 60 feet of sidewalk. Remember, we only came in at 35 at the last look. So we made our 20 plus that extra 5 that we slipped. We did good. We caught up with extra labor. We delivered 60% of the total sidewalk, $1,200. So earned value equals planned value. We're doing really good. But, actual cost, something happened. We spent $1,300 to get this. We had an extra $100 to catch up on the schedule. So that's where we paid, right? So one thing improves, one thing sometimes balances it out. So now we're off on our actual costs. So again, earned value is $1,200, right on target. Actual cost is $1,300, which is $100 more than we planned for at this time, right? So schedule variance, EV minus PV, 1,200 minus 1,200. So schedule-wise, we're right on track. Schedule performance index, EV divided by PV, 1,200 divided by 1,200. We're right on track. 1. This shows we delivered 1 unit of work for every planned unit of work. All right, now cost variance. This is where we went out of whack, right? EV minus AC, we're negative 100. That's bad. It shows we spent $100 more than we planned to spend. And then the CPI, EV divided by AC, 0.923. Anything below 1 is bad on an index. This shows we spent $1 for every 92.3 cents worth of work completed. All right, so we made up somewhere, we lost somewhere. So now we're cruising along. Week 4, planned value is $1,600, 80 foot of sidewalk, $20 a linear foot. That's $1,600. How did we do? End of week 4, we're back on it. We delivered $1,600. We delivered 80 feet of sidewalk, 80% of the total $2,000 budget at completion. How do we do on actual cost? Look at this. We came in at $1,600. Labor worked extra hard to get done early before holiday. Boom, Now we are balanced, planned value, earned value, actual cost, all sitting at $1,600. We're looking good. So earned value, actual cost, $1,600. Schedule variance, EV minus PV, 0. We deliver what we plan. SPI, EV divided by PV, is 1. We deliver 1 unit of work for every planned unit of work. Cost variance, EV minus AC, is 0. We spent what we planned to spend. And then CPI is 1. We spent $1 for $1 worth of work that we completed. So we're looking great. We're right on target. Week 5, planned value, 2,000. This is our last week. We're going to be 100 feet of sidewalk. We're going to be done, $2,000. Earned value, how did we do at the end of week 5? We hit it. We came in at $2,000. We delivered 100 feet of sidewalk, just as planned. We delivered 100% of our budgeted completion of $2,000. We're doing great. Actual cost, look at this. We only spent $1,900. We were budgeted for $2,000, but we only spent $1,900. Again, labor was working hard on the previous week, and they just flowed right into the last week. They worked extra hard. We only spent $1,900. So what does that mean for us? Earned value is $2,000. Actual cost, $1,900. Schedule variance is EV minus PV. It's not cost related, right? It's schedule. 2,000, 2,000, 0. We deliver what we plan. SPI is 1. We delivered 1 unit of work for every planned unit of work. Cost variance, EV minus AC, is positive 100. This shows we spent $100 less than we planned to spend. That's great. And then CPI, remember we said anything above 1 is good. We finished at 1.05. So we spent $1 for every $1.05 worth of work completed, and the project is now done. And this is the formulas. These are all the formulas that we use to come through this example. So let's do another pass on this. We have schedule variance at the top. It's EV minus PV. We have schedule performance index. It's EV divided by PV. We have cost variance, which is EV minus AC, and then cost performance index is EV divided by AC. And then we have these 2 complete performance index based on budgeted completion. You'll see the BAC is in this one, and that's our original budgeted completion was 2,000. And then in our example, complete performance index with EAC, an option for estimate at completion, and that was 2285. So there's 2 different ways that we can do TCPI. And then we have the estimate at completion is we want to revise our budget, our final budget. One is BAC minus or divided by CPI. That's pervasive issue, ongoing, reoccurring. It's going to happen up until now, until the end of the project. And then EAC plus BAC minus EV, that formula is used to represent a one-time anomaly. It's not going to happen again. It only rained one day. And then we have that ETC, right? Estimate to completion calculation. If you want to weight SPI or CPI that we said probably don't need to worry about, just want you to be aware of it. And then the last one is the estimate to completion, which is the adjusted budget at the end minus the actual cost we've already spent. That tells us what do we need to spend between now and the end of the budget or end of the project. And that was the last slide. All right, so what questions do you have?
I don't have a question. I just want to say something real quick here, Chris. On the estimate to completion, it's actually not an adjusted budget. Estimate at completion is an estimate. It's our estimate on how much it's going to take to finish right now based on what we see. Budgeted completion is, so it's essentially, it should be a one-time thing. At the very beginning, here's our budget, and we work towards that budget, and we finish it. The only time the budget changes, the budgeted completion changes, is if we're way off. Now we might use like the to complete the TCPI for based on a budget and the estimate, to say, hey, when we're trying to make our case to get more funding, it's like, hey, we're going to have to do 1.5 CPI to complete this thing on if we don't get more money. So, and we'll need a 0.875 or whatever to finish on budget if you give us more money. So you might be pointing those things out. You might use that information for that. But remember, EAC is not been approved. It's just what you think is going to happen. So you can keep that in mind. It's not an adjusted BAC. The BAC is always the BAC. It might have been changed, adjusted by a change request, but then it becomes the new BAC. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. I got a little loose on my terminology.
That's okay. There's a lot of acronyms and stuff out here.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Can you go back to slide 30?
Let's see if I have. That's my slide 30. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's perfect. So budget at completion, the 2,000, that was calculated off of, so what is that calculated off of? That's calculated off of what?
So $20 a linear foot times 100 feet of sidewalk.
Yeah. Parametric estimates. This is how we calculated that at the beginning. And just an FYI, this example was very simplified. In real life, it's not going to be as objective. It's not, I got to deliver 100 feet, so I know I'm 20% done when I deliver 20 feet. I know I'm 40% done when I deliver 40 feet. You know, an IT project, it's not going to be nearly that simple. You're not going to have those easy breakdowns, but you will have your WBS, and you can, when you estimate that out, you can say, yeah, it's going to take us this many man hours to do this work package from the WBS and this many, and I have my schedule, so I know how much I'm supposed to be spending along the way, and you can put those things in order. So those will kind of help you out on that. And then this was an easy linear one. It's not going to be like that. They're going to be, most projects are going to be an S curve because you're going to be doing different kinds of things throughout the project. Whereas in this particular one, it's the same thing. You're laying forms, you're putting down gravel, you're pouring concrete, you're smoothing it out, you're moving on, you're doing it over and over and over and over again, the same thing repeatedly. Whereas like an IT project, you're planning and then you're designing and then you're building and then you're closing it all out kind of thing. So this is a very simplified example, but it's all going to be based on those estimates that you put together. I mean, your budgeted completion, when we talked about cost, or when, I don't know who talked to you guys about cost, when you talked about cost, you estimated either using parametric estimates or analogous estimates or bottom-up estimates, and you totaled all those things all up and you rolled them all up into your budgeted completion. Does that help?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to know what numbers here we multiplied by each other to get to 2,000. Was it the 10? So you have PV equals 20 feet times 200 divided by 10. Is that divided by 10?
Well, no, it's like 200. It's for every 10 feet, it costs $200, and he's like Matt said, it's a parametric estimate.
I see. Okay.
Or $20 a linear foot is a parametric estimate. So you could say $20 a foot times 100 feet, 20 times 100, 2,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What are the questions we have? I will tell you again, going through this myself, you have to memorize these formulas. And in this example, probably is one of the best, even though it's as simple as it is, it's one of the best examples that I've seen, because I used this same one, Matt. I remember when I was studying for it, that it just makes sense and it helps you solidify what are the formulas and why they are the way they are. If you just read through this several times, every time you read it, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yep. And one of the other things though too is not just remembering the formulas, it's remembering which formula to use when. Again, like a pervasive issue, you're going to use CPI to calculate your estimated completion. And if it's a one-time thing, well, you know, you don't want to, if it costs you $100 more this month than, you know, or this work period than normal, and you calculate using CPI, you're assuming it's going to cost you $100 more every work period, when that might not be the case. So you got to make sure you know when you use which one. And again, they only put they only use the one formula in the new material, but the PMBOK is still the book. So I mean, you still need to probably know that. And they did have questions about those on the exam, so I would make sure you know that really well.
All right, Matt, are we sharing this PowerPoint with everyone?
Yeah, you can. That's fine. I actually, Brian, I asked Brian to put it out on the SharePoint or on the wiki. But you know, he might not have that last slide on there either. I can't remember when I sent that over to him.
It doesn't.
You may want to just go ahead and give him this.
We created that today, because we thought it was a
but he
nice
sent it out
bonus.
today. He gave it to him today, so I can't remember which one he's got out there. But yeah, you might want to give him. You can give him this. That's fine.
I will. All right.
So
we still have scheduled time left if any questions.
I have a question for everybody else out there. So the actual cost and the earned value, do you guys know where those numbers come from? Anybody know where that comes from? In the PMBOK, we have a thing called work performance data. Just so you know, those numbers, people are gonna report those numbers. Those numbers will come in from the project. They'll say, we completed this stuff, and then you'll put a value on it, and they'll say, and your budget will come through, and you'll say, we spent your actuals for this month, we spent this much. So just kind of, hopefully that helps tie it all together. Work performance data, you'll see that sequence a lot, going from work performance data to work performance information to our work performance, information to work performance data. You'll see those as inputs into those outputs, and you'll see that throughout the book. And I believe they have that in the new material too. So those are examples of work performance data, those actual costs and that earned value that we get. That's it. Right. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Well, guys, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up a little early tonight. As I mentioned, Cindy and I will be back together in a couple of weeks, and we're going to teach 2 more classes together. So we look forward to spending more time with you guys. And part of it we're going to talk about is earned value management. So you're going to see it again. And I'll feed it to you again. Not the same slides, but we'll go back to the standard slides that we're getting from PMI. So look forward to that. And other than that, I hope everybody, thanks for your time tonight, engagement. And I hope everybody has a good night and good rest of the week. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.